Hello, friends and listeners. Welcome to Truth, Lies, and Alibis, the true crime podcast from three friends sharing their perspectives from having years of 911 dispatching experience.
Episode 9, Family or Intruder, JonBenet Ramsey Case Part 2. On today's episode, we finish discussing the details and stipulations around JonBenet's murder. So, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Ramseys because I feel like, one, it's kind of important to know a little bit about it, to how it relates to the crime, and also, two, because I think part of why this case was so big was because the family that it happened to, not only just the victim, but the way she was raised, and that's kind of why it kind of blew up in the media and why we still talk about it now, I feel like. When Patsy was 21, she won Miss Virginia, and she went on to attend West Virginia University with the hope that she would become a journalist. However, she met her husband, John Ramsey, and she went on to be a homemaker. It is like, John was a lot older than her. He had been married before. He already had kids from a previous marriage, but her and John went on to have Burke and JonBenet. In 1989, Ramsey formed the Advanced Product Group, one of three companies that merged to become Access Graphics, and he became the president and chief executive over that company, and a computer service company and a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin. And in 1996, Access Graphics alone grossed over $1 billion, and Ramsey was named Entrepreneur of the Year by the Boulder Chamber of Commerce. Immediately following the murder of his daughter, he was basically put on temporary leave, and then he came back, and I guess it affected the business. But before her murder, his net worth was reported to be $6.4 million, right? So if you're kidnapping from a millionaire, why are you
asking for $118,000?
Yeah.
Which
is so specific.
I'll bring up again in a minute about why it's so specific. Patsy Ramsey, because she had been Miss Virginia, wanted JonBenet to experience the pageant world as well and entered JonBenet in many pageants, and she won a lot of them. She'd been in a lot of them. There's been a lot said about how inappropriate it was for JonBenet to be in these pageants and the way she was dressed. And I don't know, I'm sure you guys have seen all the pictures of her, right? She looks like an adult. And the outfits she wore were a little bit not for children in some people's minds. And I guess it came out later, too, that she had been bleaching her hair blonde. And it had been for quite some time because she'd been doing pageants for at least a year, right? So she's this 6-year-old and she's bleaching her hair blonde for the pageant world and dressing her in these inappropriate costumes, which is like, you know, even now the pageant moms exist. It's not something I don't think I'll ever understand because even though I was in pageants, it wasn't like that for me.
Yeah, I have to throw that out there too. The whole, Toddlers and Tiaras and those whole shows, that is a whole other world. I can tell you when I did pageants, I didn't have veneers, I didn't have fake tans.
Yep.
My mom either made my dresses or found them at like secondhand places. Yes. Yeah. My mother woke up early every morning to curl my hair. I don't think I even ever wore makeup.
Yeah.
Like, I have pictures of that back then, and I don't have makeup on. There was a while there, especially at the height of Toddlers and Tiaras, when, like, people would find out that I used to do pageants. There's this, like, idea of what goes along with that. That is not the world I knew.
Yeah.
It was so, like, benign. It didn't damage me at all. The worst thing that came out of it is right after I stopped doing it, I hit a hard tomboy phase. Because I had worn so many frilly dresses. I just had cashed in all that too soon. And right immediately afterwards, I went to wearing Jinko, big jeans, and baggy t-shirts.
Oh, I love Jinkos.
But it never made me feel weird about myself, about the other girls doing it, because I specifically remember there were mothers that took it more seriously. I don't remember fake tans. I don't remember veneers. I know there were kids around my age that wore makeup, but it wasn't this severity of turning your child into a doll.
And or
pushing,
like an adult.
And pushing these body images onto them, that their teeth have to be perfect, that they have to have the proper tan, that like
perfect hair.
Yeah, I mean, I hated sitting on a caboodle in a chair every morning while my mom curled my hair. I have have a lot of hair. It took a long time.
So you know what I remember about the Cinderella pageants too is like, yeah, we had big hair and maybe we wore a little bit of makeup, but I remember specifically wearing like a sweater, like a fancier sweater in my pictures, right? It wasn't kind of revealing clothing or like too flashy. Yeah. And you could definitely see from the pictures and the videos and stuff that JonBenet's mom was that pageant mom that probably would have been in Toddlers and Tiaras. Well, but that's because of her background, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's inappropriate and weird to us. And another thing is, like, a lot of people have speculated that pageant world opened her up to a lot of pedophiles. And maybe it did. Because anyone who didn't have a kid who might be going to these shows probably wasn't there.
You don't need to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. Were there people checking? Oh, which kid's yours? You know what I mean? No.
All you have to do is buy a ticket.
Didn't it come out, like, in the last 10 years that there was a pedophile ring or there was some stuff going on with that?
Yep. There's been lots of stuff that's come out that like pedophiles do go because of this case too, but they do go to stuff like that. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can go into. Like you can get lost in this case forever, really, if you want to go down every single theory. And there's theories that there was pedophile rings that were linked back to this and that maybe her family knew, maybe they didn't, I don't know. But there's also a theory, I think there was a pageant judge or somebody who owned a pageant company who it later came out, he was a pedophile. And then there was like a photographer who took pictures of these girls because you have to get pictures.
My mom did all of mine.
And it comes out that he had... Smart. He had child pornography on his computer. And so that's the thing is like people who don't have kids, what are they doing getting involved in that world? It's weird. So there's lots of theories, like tons of theories that we can go into. So there's the one where either John or Patsy were involved and they were molesting her and they did a cover up because something happened and went too far. There's the Burke theory that we talked about. Another thing to lend to the Burke theory is that a friend reported that he was really jealous of all the attention JonBenet got. And I could understand that because he's born first, right? And then his mom gets this perfect little girl that she can live through. And she's pushing her to do these pageants. And she's pushing her to do all this stuff and giving her all this attention. And oh my God, JonBenet. Well, apparently one of the friends says her and him had gotten into an argument before. And he had hit her in the head with a golf club. So it's not too far from a golf club to being upset that she's taking his pineapple and hitting her over the head with the flashlight, if that really did happen. There had been more, I guess, throughout the investigation, they determined there had been more than 100 burglaries in the Ramsey's neighborhood in the months before the murder. There were about 38 registered sex offenders living within a 2-mile radius of their home. And
that seems like a lot.
Yeah. There was a couple suspects identified in the case, like I said. There was a Gary Howard Oliva who was arrested for 2 counts of attempted sexual exploitation of a child and 1 count of sexual exploitation of a child in June of 2016. And he was one of Smith's leads in the case, like he was a suspect. There's also been like multiple false confessions in the case by pedophiles, and one in particular that was like, I remember being all over the news and they really thought for sure they had found who had killed her. And it was Alexis Valeron Reach. He's a 41-year-old elementary school teacher who was arrested in Bangkok, Thailand on August 15th, 2006 because she falsely confessed to murdering JonBenet. She had previously been known as John Mark Carr prior to coming out as a transgender woman, and she claimed that she had drugged, sexually assaulted, and accidentally killed JonBenet. I watched this interview on one of the documentaries, I think it's the Investigation Discovery one on JonBenet, with this person in it, and they are so creepy. Just watching them talk and everything they say. And it's like they're trying really, really hard to say that they killed JonBenet because they have this fantasy around her. And it's really disgusting and really creepy. And I don't want to go too much into detail about it. But it was determined they weren't involved in the crime.
Well, there was no drugs found in her system, right?
No, not as far as I know. So this year, it'll be the 26th year anniversary of the murder of the 6-year-old JonBenet, and the case still remains unsolved. So to close, I wanted to come back to a couple more things. I wanted to circle back to that 911 call. And the ransom note. So the ransom note, one, they found out was written on Patsy's notepad with a marker that belonged to the family. And the $118,000 mentioned in the ransom note matches the amount of John's bonus that year. The 911 operator who took the call, Kim Archuleta, told investigators in a recent documentary that she felt like the call had been rehearsed, and she thought she heard Patsy say at the end of the call, "We called the police, now what?" She also said that the call felt really off because as soon as she thought she hung up the phone, Patsy no longer seemed frantic.
Yeah.
She also says she heard 2 or maybe 3 voices on the call. And in the same documentary, that's when the investigators attempted to enhance the 911 call. And they think they hear someone saying, "We're not speaking to you." A female voice says, "What did you do?" And a child says, "What did you find?" So if Burke was asleep, who was the child on that call?
So is there speculation that there's a second female there, or that female they believe is still
I think
Patsy?
it was Patsy.
Okay.
Another thing about the ransom note is there was also like a few people who, like the handwriting experts, that believed that the note was written by her. It was probably her handwriting. And also there was proof that whoever wrote this note, they practiced it. So there was a paper that they had tried to start writing on, and then they had crumpled it up, and then they went on to make the final copy. And they also noted that the note contained lines from like various movies. I think one of them was like Speed, and some other movie at the time, like they kind of matched a little bit. And then they say that the Ramseys were like movie buffs, and so they had a bunch of movie posters in their home.
Well, called it. That's exactly what it reminded me of like freaking Die Hard or a movie or...
I know, I was trying not to tell you because I wanted to save it for the end.
I don't know, I think maybe brother did it and parents are covering up.
The
family was involved, and I just don't think that I can agree with anybody who says that it was somebody that was uninvolved. If it's going to be an intruder, you're not going to murder that person in their home. Like, it's a kid. You're not going to take that kid into another room and murder them in that room while everybody's sleeping. There's not going to be one person in that house that doesn't hear some kind of struggle. She had to have screamed. She was struggling. And then you're going to write this ransom note that says, I'm going to deny you the body of your kid. I'm going to, like, you're being watched, and, like, make a paranoia thing and, like, do all this and then claim, like, and who else is going to really know his bonus, the amount of his bonus, other than it's somebody that he works with. Well, and
he's a millionaire. Why aren't you asking for millions?
Yeah, or, like, specifically 118. Specifically. That's freaking weird. It's not like 120. Like, those $1 million is a millionaire.
Like even.
Those even numbers. Yeah. Those numbers that are like, I want 150.
Well, and who's gonna stay in the home that long and start to practice writing this letter,
right?
And be like,
crumple it up.
That didn't sound right.
Like, and then they're like, "Oh, let me write this 4-page freaking novel."
It was only 3 pages, actually.
Okay, I'm sorry. But like, also, it's a novel.
You're gonna say, "I won't speak to you without my wife or my husband," and then you're not gonna cooperate, and then you're gonna book a plane. All of a sudden, like, I'm just gonna take my private jet out. Cool, that's great. You have a private jet, but like, so, like, I don't know, dude. Like, that's just not.
It's weird. And another thing to mention is John had those 2 kids before, right? Well, his daughter had died in a car accident prior to this. So my thought is, if Burke did this, maybe they didn't want to lose another kid. And I don't understand that because I don't think I would make the same decision. But maybe that was what was in their mind, is like they didn't want to lose yet another kid. They had already lost this daughter. Then they lost JonBenet. Maybe they didn't know. I guess there was a law in place then in Colorado that if the child was under 10 years old, they couldn't go to jail for murder. And I believe he was like 9 years and 11 months old. So he couldn't have gone to jail, but they didn't know that because who's going to know that law unless it applies to you, kind of, you know what I mean? So maybe they were like, we can't lose another kid. Let's cover this up.
I just feel like there's definitely a lot of this doesn't make sense, right? And then on top of that, there's this chaos of cause of death. COD was the asphyxiation. The strangulation.
So it wasn't even the head injury. Like, they probably could have called and got her help.
Right. And so that's an excellent point, is that there's enough of, like, the circumstances point enough to, like, an altercation or something happening. Like, he maybe knocks her unconscious with the flashlight, and then he still has that anger, whatever this 9-year-old kid is thinking about in this middle of this, fit of rage. And then your parents wake up, and there is this scramble there's obviously panic behind trying to come up with this ransom note. And it's obviously, we're not going to say that Burke did it, so we're going to say that it's a ransom, and we're going to put this all down in the ransom. But there's no thought to the fact that your daughter's body is still in the house, and that these wounds are going to be obvious. And if you're going to say it's an intruder, then make it look like an intruder. Like, were you going to give away the $180,000? Like, put it in an offshore account so nobody can find it? Like, that money, obviously, the ransom note is garbage to begin with, because immediately you're doing things to counteract that. Don't call the cops. I've called the cops. Don't tell anybody. I'm calling all my friends over. So you're immediately putting no importance to that letter. So why would anybody else? Why even pretend to go to the bank when you've already gone against this letter so many other times? Like, there's no belief in it even from them. Also, there's
no planning.
There isn't.
No,
that's,
it's
I guess
panicked.
that's the whole, yes, that's kind of where I was going with all this, is there's no planning, and it's panicked, and I'm gonna, write this with my own stationery, and I'm gonna, it's interesting. Again, it brings me back to the why they think it's an intruder, because everything else points to the family being involved, but these people that have all the details and have all the information of the case are saying that it's an intruder. Why are you saying that? Because what we see doesn't point to that. No intruder, like you guys said, no intruder is going to search the house and write up a 3-page letter that, first of all, if you're coming to somebody's house to kidnap, coming to somebody's house to kidnap their daughter to leave ransom, your note's written already.
Yes, on your own stationery. And what the heck, attaché? Let's just come back to that word,
wording
okay?
in this freaking
what
letter.
The heck?
Yeah, attaché.
Who's gonna write that?
What else was in there that I was like?
Yeah, the gentleman who kidnapped your child.
We respect your company, but not the country. I don't know. Like Jessica said, you're writing a letter. You're if you're gonna write it that long, you're gonna leave clues as to who you are. It's not
you
a
could get caught,
point
too.
A, point B, point C, end of letter, right? We have your daughter, we want this money, you call the fucking police, fuck you, she's gone, we're gonna call you at 8 a.m. Answer that phone. We're out.
Well, where did they sit to write this letter? This is my thought. Oh, I'm just going to sit at the kitchen table and take my time. How long did it take them to write that letter? Let's say it was an intruder. I don't think it was. They're sitting at the table writing forever. Anyone could come downstairs.
Yeah, it's not
believable.
Not anything that makes sense. Yeah.
If you're going to carry out a crime that big, you're going to have it planned out. You're going to have watched them. You're going to, it's going to be planned. And there was literally no planning.
Yeah.
No.
And it's only a certain amount of people who want to say that it was an intruder. So there's other people who are also completely involved in the case who say for sure they think the Ramseys had something to do with it. Whether it be covering up or something bad happened, it just wasn't planned. And there are people who are saying that it was an intruder, but there's no evidence at all. And the fact that there's no evidence in that home except for the family, I'm sorry, but what?
Yeah.
What? It makes no sense.
If you've watched anything or you've read anything regarding an actual break-in or an actual kidnapping of a kid from an unknown, not a family member, not a friend, but an unknown person, that person has watched. It's not usually impulsive, right? That person has either watched them or they have been given the opportunity, the door is open in the middle of the night. They've been given an opportunity to commit a crime and they're familiar with them though. And I just don't think that there's no way in hell that some person broke into this family's home in the middle of the night, did God knows what, had all this time, violently murdered somebody, ate a bowl of pineapple and milk, where she had pineapple and milk, wrote a ransom note, and then just toddled out of their fucking house. Okay, I did this thing. Okay, see you later. And then you randomly wake up in the middle of the night? No. There's been too much that's been released to the public that makes it this is too weird. It's too weird for family not to be involved. And like you said, maybe they were scared of losing another kid. And maybe they were scared. She's a high societal lifestyle, right? He's this big to-do person with his business. She's involved in child pageants. She's clearly a part of circles. Are you embarrassed of losing your status?
They need to protect their reputation.
Have to protect their reputation, have to protect the finances. Screw it if they really care about their kid, because in this case, I don't really see if there's any true caring of their children other than using your child as a pretty thing to look at. I know these people are still alive,
and it's gaining the publicity out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Patsy died of breast cancer, I want to say.
Sad. I'm sorry,
she'd
Patsy.
had it before, and she had beat it, and then she died later of breast cancer, and I guess John's remarried, and he's done interviews, he's been part of documentaries or podcasts that have tried to help solve the case years later, but it seems weird to me. Like, maybe it's just me being judgy, and everyone has their own opinion, right? So there's probably 50% of the public who think he did it or the family did it, and then there's like 50% who think, oh, it had to have been a home intruder, because they don't want to think that a parent could do that horrible thing. But
world's much more awful than that, unfortunately.
So many things in our life where, I don't know, like that's the reality of it, right? Monsters aren't real. The monsters are the people. Like Scooby-Doo did a great
people, you know,
great job of showing that, you know,
the bad guy's
always somebody behind a mask, and it's not.
Yep.
The ghost isn't. Sorry, I mean, I know we've talked about the paranormal in the past, but the ghost isn't real. The monster under your bed isn't real. What's real is that there are people out there that are born different, that enjoy causing harm to somebody else, or they don't have any control over their emotions. They don't have control over how they react with their anger. And maybe they're a completely sane person, but their anger is so incredibly horrible that they flip out, right? Like, we've seen people turn on a dime. So you just never really know. And I think sitting here and trying to prove, again, like Jessica said, why do you think it's an intruder? Because what are you not sharing that we don't know that specifically points to intruder? Because everything that the public knows, everything that the media knows, everything that's been portrayed in this case and that has come out is that there's no way in hell that they didn't have something to do with this. And I'm sorry, like, if that's something, clearly that's something you're going to have to live with if you're a part of that family. But at what point do you, so you're going to live the rest of your life knowing this horrible thing happened to your daughter and you're just going to go to your grave with it? I mean, it's even for the sake of, like, it's not even for the sake of the public to know, right? At some point, if you know something, you need to go to the authorities and say, I know this information, this is what really happened. Bring some, like, closure to that grief that you're still living with.
Well, and who knows, by the time with Burke, right? He's 9 years old. If he is the person responsible, by the time they actually get to talk to him and sit down with him and do this interview, his memory is different. Mm-hmm. His parents have had a year and a half to rewrite that scenario for him.
Yep, and to say if it was his fault, oh, you didn't do that, like, kind of convince him.
That was a dream. Yeah. You didn't do anything.
And the sad thing is, this is one of the cases that I want to know who did it so bad, and I know tons of people do, and I want there to be justice for her. But because of all the speculation and because of all the things that have happened, and the DA, like, did a public apology to the parents and said that they weren't involved, and just all of the craziness that surrounds it, I don't think we'll ever have closure.
My mom said that too.
Your mom's a smart lady.
She is pretty smart. She's pretty smart. Yeah, that's my big thing, is coming back to the why of it all. Like, because if it is a home invasion that went horribly wrong, this person broke into, I don't know, kidnap the kid, whatever their initial motivation was. Obviously, something happened and that changed because they had to hurry and write a 3-page ransom note. They had to get rid of this little girl's body. They couldn't go very far because they took her downstairs to a room down there. If it is an unrelated third party that had to scramble that much to come up with things like that, they would have made other mistakes. There would have been more things left behind. You said there was tape, right? Mm-hmm. Like, were there no fingerprints on the tape? Because didn't you say that there was, like, tape around her neck or something?
Yeah, and I'm not sure if they ever initially tested. The thing is,
John found her.
Yeah, and he held her in his arms, and then when he came upstairs, Patsy also touched her. So even if there was any kind of forensic stuff done with it, because it was, the 90s, who knows what they were doing
right
then.
Yeah.
They could be like, oh, that's there because I found her, remember? Oh, that's there because I was holding her, remember?
Well, like we've said before, that just needs to be, like, if you take it in front of a jury, all you have to do is plant that seed of doubt that that's my roll of tape that the intruder found. So of course my fingerprints are on there, and I found her. So of course my fingerprints are on there. But that's, if the intruder aspect is true, there would have been, and the fact that it went so chaotic, this obviously wasn't planned, because you wouldn't write your 3-page ransom note in the house in which you're committing this crime. Because you're apparently so organized, you know the phone calls they're making, you know how much money he's worth, you're watching them, you obviously have all of these gentlemen with all of these resources.
Your acheté.
You're not gonna, with your acheté, that you're not gonna write your note in the house. So if the intruder's true, he wrote that there, that means something went horribly wrong and they scrambled. There would have been, they would have messed up somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then, like, they wouldn't have just come in, I'm just gonna go and I'm gonna commit this kidnapping and all of the stuff that I need is gonna be there. And
yes.
I just have to find it. Like,
also, like, what? 118. How specific?
It's weird.
Like,
no. Yeah.
And it just
weird.
happens to be the bonus that you got. That's, come on.
There's too much that adds up that doesn't make sense.
There's too much that doesn't necessarily point to one of the family members, but that points away from an outsider.
Mm-hmm. Yep, too much.
Okay, so maybe that's the intruder thing. Maybe it's not a third party that they don't know. Maybe it is a family member who they haven't released names of, who had keys to the house, who had JonBenet's trust, who could keep her quiet. Maybe the murder didn't happen in the home and it happened outside and he brought her back in. But if you had keys and you were familiar with the thing, maybe that's where they're coming at with the intruder. That is the only way that I can think of as quote unquote intruder. Maybe it is a family friend or something close that the family doesn't want to implicate because that's too horrifying. So it's either the family did it or the family knows who did it and they're not saying anything.
They're covering
either way, they're covering
it up.
Yeah.
Which, how...
The grand jury said that too.
I don't know. Like, again, I'm not a parent, but how could you
cover that up for someone took your child away?
You're essentially putting I don't know, you're giving a hierarchy of needs and your daughter's not at the top.
What if that person has blackmail? What if they know something that would, you know what I mean? Like you said, like, how could your kid not be at the top of your list? But what if that person knows more about them, they're more afraid of that than they are of losing their kid?
Well, maybe they were involved in some weird pageantry stuff. I don't know. This is where all the speculation comes in. But at some point, now Patsy's dead. John lost his company, I think, because of all this media attention and everything. At some point, you're just got to be like, well, my life's ruined already. I might as well freaking take down the person who ruined my whole world and took my child away. And I don't care who it was. I would not rest until that person paid for what they did.
I agree. I just don't, that's the only way that I can think that I can even remotely come close to agreeing that it was a quote unquote intruder, is if it was somebody extremely close to them, had a key, knew the layout of the home, was familiar with the home, like to find stationery or to use Patsy's paintbrushes. You know what I mean? Like to gain the trust of a child that knew that maybe that kid liked pineapple and milk. That's pretty specific. That's a pretty specific snack. I mean, if that's the point and that's the why, I could understand it. Either way, they know something. That family knows something that nobody else knows, period.
And if it's enough that, like, lead investigator, somebody coming in who's taking over everything, who's like, yes, we're not looking into the family anymore because we know the family's not involved because it was an intruder, then it's like, if that's not being shared and it's something that the family knows and the family wants to keep it a secret, like, somebody has to know. So that's a whole nother level. Exactly. That's a whole nother level of cover up.
I can understand coming into it and having, like I said earlier, you feel for the family. They've been through a lot. Look at all of this media coverage. Things are confusing and convoluted and things are all messed up. And you're trying to look at it from a different perspective. Cool. Look at it from a different perspective, but don't declare that it's this one thing and lose half of the investigators that have already had
that were
multiple,
there.
You know what I mean? Yeah, that were there, that have multiple insights to this case. And they could remember something that is imperative to your case.
Yep.
There's people out there that come in, like, they want to be like the people who solved the Bundy stuff or Gacy, or you want that like little bit of glory. That's not what law enforcement's about. That's not what doing anything of a public like service is about. It's about serving your community. And are you serving your community, and are you doing what's best for those victims, or are you serving yourself? And if you're serving yourself, there's your answer. You shouldn't be involved in it, period.
Yes. Yep.
In my mind, regardless of an intruder or not, there's no way that the family can't know something or be involved in somehow. And also, like, making things like we're not, like, we will talk to you, but we're going to talk to you together. Come on.
Yeah. Do we know, and this is very presumptuous, but obviously he's lived a very careful life given what happened when he was 9 years old. Does Burke, did he go on to have any sort of criminal history? Like, do we know anything of what happened with Burke?
As far as I know, no. He went to college. There's a lot of information in that Dr. Phil interview, I think. You guys should definitely watch it if you're into this case. I know he sued CBS or one of the companies who put together a documentary that basically stated their theory is that he was involved, but that's all I know.
It's just kind of sad that there's never going to be any closure, because I think this is just one of the ones that, like you said, there's no answers are gone. It'll never be.
Well, all that evidence was gone, if there was any.
Yeah.
I'm not saying there was, because I think there was evidence there, but it all would have led back to the family.
Yeah, I think so.
But they mishandled the case, and it was chaos.
And who knows what, I mean, it was 1997, right? So it doesn't seem like it was that long ago, but it was. Or 96. I was 6 years old, right? 6 or 7. And who knows what, I'm not saying they did this. I'm not implicating anything, but he's a millionaire. So who knows who he paid off on what.
Yes.
Because money, I mean, money, fear.
Money can buy anything, really.
So maybe.
Weren't we saying in the previous episode you can pay anybody to say whatever you want, basically, as long as you can pay the right price?
Yep.
So I don't know. Like I said, I'm not. There's many theories out there, and I'm not. My personal theory. I think we've all stated our personal theories on it, but.
Jessica has come to our side.
It is really sad. It's really sad and unfortunate that, like, I don't know, it just makes me thankful that I've been very lucky to live the life that I've lived, and I'm very lucky to feel like I have better moral judgments in my life than to think that I would allow my status or finances or whatever to trump the love of my family or children. And I don't know if that's appropriate, but this case it just makes you realize how important family really is, and like how important a good parent really is to a kid.
Thank you for listening. Additional information for each case can be found on our website, truthliesandalibis.buzzsprout.com. New episodes will be uploaded every Monday. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Truth, Lies, and Alibis.